I'm waiting for the recording to start. Yeah, we're being recorded as of now. Okay. And these are the slides, everyone. Okay. I think I need to minimize. Doesn't have to be full screen, otherwise I'll be there for the rest of the class. Okay. Okay. So again, I'm sharing the slides. Okay. So like I said before I started the recording, today marks a shift from book one to book two. Book one was all about reputations. Actually, the title of the book was Reputations, and the chapters lived up to the title, if you still remember. It was all about reputations, disputed as they were. We spoke about Christopher Marlowe, we spoke about Cleopatra, we did some of the divas and how contested the reputations were. And then this time around, we're moving to book two, and book two is about tradition and descent. This is actually the title of the book. So tradition, we know. Descent is perhaps unheard of or not very familiar to your ears, and this is what we are here for, to kind of explain what descent is and what descent also entails. Okay, so we're doing Plato. Plato is a Greek philosopher, and we'll talk about two aspects. We're going to talk about the idea of tradition and whether he agrees with it or not, and if he doesn't, he would become a dissenter, which means that he dissents or deviates from. We'll talk about the concept itself, the concept of dissension in a minute. So it's Plato that we're having today, inshallah. And of course, we cannot talk about Plato without talking about philosophy, Greek philosophy, the other two major philosophers that are always kind of coupled with him. We normally have Plato, and before him we have Aristotle, Socrates, and after Plato we have Aristotle. So we'll talk about the three. We'll talk about, Greek philosophy, what philosophy means and what stands for, and how different it is from the other branches of knowledge, as you're going to see. Again, there is a focus. Obviously, this is not a philosophy class because we're English major, not philosophy department. So the material that we're dealing with this time around happens to be philosophy, but the aims are still English major. The aims that we have in mind would have to do with reading a text, a philosophical text to be more specific, how to break it down to its basic components, how to analyze it, how to kind of skim through it and come up with ideas and conclusions. So the philosophy that we have is only material that can allow us to develop our English major skills of analysis and appreciation. Okay, right. As you can see, we have a number of items on the chapter agenda. We're going to start off with defining traditional belief. And then we move on to Plato, because Plato happens to be the one who raises the issue of whether to stick to traditional belief or kind of steer away from it, as we're going to see. So what is a traditional belief? And then we move on to Plato and Socrates. And if we cannot talk about Plato and Socrates unless we talk about where they were born and how influential the place that they were born in on them. We talk about Athens, and Athens was um, the place where philosophy and science started in the ancient world, of course. And then we move to Plato and Socrates and see the relationship between them. We're moving on a number of levels. We're moving on the level of reality, where Plato at one point was the pupil or the student of Socrates, and we're going to move on another imaginative level, where Plato would use Socrates as his main characters in the so many dialogues that he created. And then we'll move to Socrates and focus on his way of, engaging with other people. Does he talk to them straight? Does he ask them questions? And what happens after they answer the questions? Does he stop there? Or does he ask them further questions? We'll talk about the Socratic way of engaging with people in conversations and in debates. And in order to give an example of that, we will have, kind of tracts or treatises, small philosophical tracts created by Plato, in which Socrates plays a major role as one of the interlocutors, one of the people who engages with other people in highlighting issues, in talking about philosophical points, in discussing things. The focus in Lachos, which is the philosophical tract that I'm talking to you about, is on also Greek tradition, especially with the idea of courage and courage endurance, the definition of courage, and whether this definition is inherited, something that comes down to us from the old generations, or should we come up with our own definition of courage, and whether we're following the definition from past generations in a blind way. Did we ever stop and ask why they say what they say and stuff like that? So there is going to be a great deal of talk about what courage means and what courage endurance entails. And in talking about that, Socrates is going to use arguments, philosophical arguments, where you normally start with a premise, statements, and then you move on to the conclusion. You come up with an assessment or a conclusion based on the premises. We'll see how the premises are created and how the conclusion comes out of them. We'll then move on to another character by the name of Nisus. So we start off with Socrates and Lachos, and then over time we'll have another individual by the name of Nicias, who is, like Lachos, is also a military general. And obviously having Nicias means that Lachos and Socrates didn't agree on the definition of courage, and obviously Socrates didn't like what Lachos said. We'll move to another dimension or another aspect when Nicias is in the picture. And then we move on to the difference between knowledge, opinion, and which of them is, perhaps more trustworthy and stuff like this. We move on and we talk about, why Socrates, in the final analysis, rejecting what they say, and by implication rejecting moral beliefs and beliefs in general. And then we end up talking about the Socratic method and whether we can apply it in teaching and learning or not. But as you can see, it's a lot of ideas, and a lot of engaging ideas if you ask me. Okay, so remember we said that our material will be a philosophical text. What we're doing is, again, developing and subsequently enhancing our English major skills, and among them or on top of them would be um, the idea of reading a text regardless of what kind of text it is, and also the idea of breaking a text down to its basic components, otherwise known as analysis or analyzing something. So this time around, we have a philosophical text. So it's a text, which means that we're reading something. And what is it that we're going to be reading? We're going to read a text, a philosophical text. And obviously, philosophical means that it's not just another text. It's you don't deal with it the way you deal with an article in a newspaper, for example. The experience is different, the tools are different, the approach is obviously different. Philosophy is heavy-handed, and it would need your full undivided attention, and this is what we are going to see in a minute. Okay, so it would be interesting to start with ways as how you can read a philosophical text. So it can be reading a philosophical text can be a time-consuming exercise if you don't know how to handle it, how to read it. Again, we said that a philosophical text is not just another text. It needs focus. It needs full concentration and full attention. Okay, so do we have a recipe for reading a philosophical text? Again, philosophy is heavy-handed, and against your best efforts, you still come out of the text a little bit confused, which is fine and healthy and everything, but at least you have, some kind of picture of what is happening. You're not totally in the dark if you deploy the tools that we're going to share together. If you read philosophical texts a lot, and if you deploy the mental tools that we will talk about, I think you can end up doing a good job reading philosophical texts. So what is it that we shouldn't do if we are reading a philosophical text? The first thing would be to pay very close attention to details. I mean, philosophical texts are all about details, and missing a piece of detail here and there can make all the difference. It doesn't mean that you have to have you have to be all the time on your toes, so that you don't miss a point here or there. No, it's not as complicated as it may seem, but again, you need to develop this mental habit of paying close attention to details. So that would apply to philosophy, and that would also apply to the other texts. But perhaps with philosophy, it's a little bit more important. So paying close attention to details is one thing that you should do with a philosophical text. You need to also read a whole section, not drips and drabs or bits and pieces. So you need to give yourself the time to get the big picture, if you like. You need to read a whole section to get the gist. And the gist would mean that the overall idea of what is happening. You're trying to negotiate your way through this philosophical text, and reading a line or two in order, and trying to come up with meaning wouldn't help. You need to read a whole section and then reflect or think of what you have read. Again, you don't stop at details at this point in time. You don't try to understand every single word. Again, this is not required at this point in time. Okay, so you pay close attention to details. You read a whole section to get the gist. The gist is the overall idea. You need to also have a pen or a pencil handy or a highlighter in order to underline or highlight keywords or phrases, which I'm sure you guys do without me or anybody else for that matter telling you to. And this is obviously something that we all do. The idea of reading, and while reading we find ourselves taking down notes or writing on the margins on either side of the page, taking important and key words and phrases to the margins or highlighting them. So this is something that we all do. You perhaps need it more when it comes to a philosophical text, so that nothing you wouldn't miss anything. You need to also develop the habit of rephrasing things using a language that you can understand. I mean, this is of course for future reference and future retrieval. You're going to read the text today and you want to come back to it tomorrow. So writing things in your own words can help you a great deal. You need to also be on, you need to also be very cautious and careful with certain words. The idea of also rephrasing them or writing them in your own words can be a bit tricky because these words are not normally replaceable. These are concepts, and changing them would change the meaning with them. So you would feel it that some words and phrases are um, irreplaceable. You need to keep them as is. You need to kind of try to understand them, but don't try to change them, because changing them can compromise and distort their meaning. Again, one final recommendation would be that you have to write things down. And writing things down can make all the difference. I remember there is a very interesting quote in Arabic, and they say reading is more or less like a catch, uh, and writing would be trapping this catch. Catch can be whatever you hunt. Okay, so if you hunt something or an animal, you need to trap it. Okay, you cannot hunt it and leave it. So if you leave it, it's going to kind of escape and run away. Okay, so reading is your something that you hunt, is your catch. Okay, and in order to keep your catch, you need to trap it. They call it in Arabic, they say القراءة صيد والكتابة قيد أو قيدها أو قيدها. قيد has a side. Qaid means that you tie it, you bind it, or you tie it so that it does not escape or flee. Okay, that would apply, of course, to any kind of reading. So you read something and then you try to write down what you have understood. This in this way, you can make sure that nothing will kind of escape your notice later. Okay, so this is how to read a philosophical text. Again, we're talking about, like I said, the material that we are covering is philosophy, and these names are going to be are going to get repeated over the course of the time we spend with the chapter. The first name would be Plato, because Plato is part of the title, and this is what and Plato is, and his, of course, writing is or are what the whole thing is about. Again, you cannot talk about Plato unless, or it wouldn't be really uh, complete without talking about Socrates, his teacher, and without talking about Aristotle, his student. Again, the three of them are philosophers, um, and philosophers. The word philosopher comes from the word philosophy. So they are philosophers, which means that they do philosophy and they engage in philosophy. Okay? So their names are obviously different from the names that we're familiar with. We don't have William, we don't have Jack, John. Their names are even, they are unfamiliar to the ears. Again, because these are Greek names, these are Greek philosophers. They belong to the period before the current era. They were born before, um, you know, before the registered records and registered history. So if we are now 2021, they were born before um, those 2021 years. Okay, this is called pre-recorded history. So they came before recorded history. Um, so they are Greek. They were born and raised in Athens, and Athens was the capital of the ancient world, if you like. Capital, not physically, I'm talking about how important Athens was. It was in Athens that philosophy came about. It was in Athens that the different sciences, whether physical or otherwise, came up. It was in Athens that abstract thinking also came about, as we're going to see. So again, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and this is, by the way, this is the order they came in. Socrates came first, and then Plato came after, and then Aristotle came after. The relationship, the scholastic relationship in between and among the three would be that Socrates was the teacher, is the big teacher, and it is Plato who came after, and he was a student of Plato, and then Plato was the teacher of Aristotle. Um, any specific differences between the three? Yes. With Socrates, you're not going to find any written work. Socrates was a person who does not write things. He has uh, ideas, of course, and he goes about in the marketplace and talk to people about this and that, but he never wrote anything. Okay, Plato is different. Plato is a writer, and he is not only a writer. He has this poeticity to his writing. He is very poetic uh, um, in what he wrote, with his analogies and with his and the mental pictures that he creates, as we're going to see. Aristotle is also a writer, but he is a different type of writer. His style of writing cannot be compared to Plato, cannot compare to Plato. Plato happens to be um, the top. Aristotle is more or less a scientist, and he focuses more not on style but on getting things done, if you like. He is not as abstract as Plato is. He is not as idealistic as Plato is. And we'll talk about idealism, which comes from the word idea. Aristotle is a man of the world, and when he does things, he does things with having the world around him in mind. Um, he has, I mean, his work is all about um, physics and about the physical sciences. Plato is more on the abstract level of things. He talks about ideas. He talks about the mind. The mind for him means a lot. One big difference between Plato and Aristotle would be that Plato is a mind-oriented philosopher, while Aristotle is somebody who believes in the senses, the different senses that we have. He is more or less like an experimental, philosopher, somebody who believes that we need to engage the senses in order to get to know about what is happening in the world. We'll talk more about that when the time is right. Again, we've been talking for quite some time about the three philosophers, and we didn't define or unpack philosophy. So, philosophy is that branch of knowledge or this area of study where people engage with big questions. It's not anymore about singing, it's not anymore about governing and the government of country. It's not about political alliances. These are petty issues when we talk about philosophy. Philosophy is bigger than that. Philosophy engages with the big questions of the world, questions that have to do with our existence as human beings, questions that are um, again about things that we do on a daily basis. When we talk about philosophy, we talk about two branches of philosophy. Of course, philosophy has more than two, but these are the two most important branches of philosophy. One of them is ontology, and the other is epistemology. Ontology and epistemology. So, ontology is this branch of philosophy that, like I told you, engages with so big questions, questions of existence, questions of identity, um, how we came into existence as human beings, how we came into, how the world was created, how and even why. Again, with ontology, you are um, talking about and engaging with the big questions about the world and about our existence on Earth. With epistemology, it's different thing. Epistemology focuses on knowledge. That's why sometimes they call it the theory of knowledge or نظرية المعرفة. The theory of knowledge means that the ideas that philosophers of epistemology engage in and explore have to do with our sources of knowledge. Um, so how do we know what we know? Is it through our senses? Is it through a revelation? Um, Remember, when we talk about revelation, we talk about religions, and we talk about really revealed um, revelations and revealed texts, sacred texts. So, is it revelation? Is it our senses, our five senses? Or is it some um, system that we have inherent within us that we're born with? They engage with questions of whether we are born white sheets of paper or we are born with some knowledge and then we develop those pieces of knowledge and stuff. But these are the questions that epistemology engages in and discusses. Again, this is not a philosophy class. Like I said, we shouldn't be missing the point. We're doing philosophy because it's the material that we utilize and use to develop, you know, um, English major skills. Okay, so let's move now. Okay, so this is the introduction of the chapter, and the writer is saying that we'll have extracts, and like I said, extracts are uh, pieces of reading, and those extracts are going to be philosophical. We'll have extracts from Lachos, and by the name Lachos is how it is pronounced in perhaps in Greek. They have this ha sound, or sound, I'm sorry. And Lachos is a dialogue written by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And one of our aims in reading these extracts is to discover how Plato uses philosophical argument to question traditional beliefs. So we have a number um, of traditional beliefs, and Plato is trying to kind of challenge them using philosophical arguments. Okay, so we're going to start with a definition of traditional belief. So traditional belief, as you can see, is made up, it's a phrase, of course, and it's made up of tradition and belief. And the two of them are familiar to us. So belief means that you believe in something. Believe in something, it means that you think this something is um, good. You think this something is truthful and honest, and that's why you embrace or believe in it. We talk about ideas of religion, for example. Ideas of religion are all beliefs that we believe in. We think that they are, kind of valuable, trustworthy, honest, and truthful. That's why we believe in them, right? So this is belief, which comes from the word believe. And then you have traditional. Traditional, of course, comes from the word tradition. And traditions are um, practice or practices that come to us from the past. We inherit them through the old generations, and then we believe in them. Believe in them. If they tell us to do something, we do it. If they guide us in a certain way, we believe that their guidance is good. So this is traditional belief. Um, we have an example when we talk about dock leaves, for example. Dock leaves are leaves. You know what leaves are. This is a leaf, right? So dock leaves are a good remedy for nettle stings. If something stings you, um, you go ask your mom, for example, and she may um, tell you go and put dock leaves on, apply it to where the the sting is, where the bite is. Um, Again, of course, you trust what your mom is saying, and your mom trusts what her mom was saying, and her mom trusts. It goes. I mean, it's a long chain, okay? And we all trust each other, and we all also trust whatever comes to us from the past. We hold the past in great esteem. We honor the past, and that's why we absolutely believe in whatever the past brings. We never doubt or question the past. Is that good? Yes, it is. We don't have a problem with that, unless the belief or the tradition that we're inheriting is harmful, is even, um, you know, if it doesn't make sense in the new world that we live in. Of course, our experiences are different from those of people in the past. So to have sets of traditions that would apply typically to the present is a little bit difficult. So sometimes we need some tweaking, sometimes we need to even discard and dismiss this piece of tradition altogether because it doesn't make sense in the modern world, and also because it does not, you know, set well with your reason and with your mind. Um, so many of our beliefs are traditional. Of course, especially the moral among them. When we say it is wrong to tell a lie, no two people would disagree on that. This is a belief, and this is a traditional belief, and this is a moral traditional belief. Um, when we say there is nothing wrong with eating meat, obviously this is also another belief that we inherited. The problem is that we take those ideas for granted. We never stop, busy as we are in the modern world. We don't stop and think about these ideas, whether they make sense. Um, there is nothing wrong with eating meat, obviously, would be a problem with some people nowadays, especially those vegetarians who believe that in animal rights, the fact that I don't have to kill um, an animal or a soul in order for food. So again, we take it for granted that we don't question it, and if even when somebody comes and questions it, we find it perhaps strange and out of place. Again, those beliefs that we inherit from the past, we accept and trust. We never question them. um, Again, why? Why do we, kind of take them as is? Because again, they come to us from the past, and our parents and our grandparents represent the past, and of course we honor and respect them, and we wouldn't doubt what they are passing down to us. We believe in what they say. And also the idea that um, if we're agreed on a number of beliefs, and those beliefs regulate our life. So if somebody comes up and says, listen, those beliefs are wrong, we shouldn't follow them anymore. And but this is a dissenting voice, and this is bringing in disharmony. So society is beliefs are more or less like the cement that tie the different members of society together. So if this cement is loose or is no more, obviously there is going to be chaos and disharmony. So again, one reason why people believe in traditional beliefs and they hold them in such um, a great esteem would be the idea that without them, uh, there will be no harmony in society. So again, traditional moral beliefs are shared by the members of a community. So all members of the community act in accordance with those traditional beliefs. Um, Again, they provide the cement that we need. So if individuals start questioning traditional beliefs, there will be confusion and conflict. Again, one other reason would be the fact that they have a long history, and people would tell you that they have those traditional moral beliefs have been tried and tested, and if they managed to come to us, if they survived that long, it means that they have a merit to them. Again, it's all about promoting social harmony. It's all about the idea of um, their value, the fact that they have been tried and tested over many generations. Again, perhaps one big reason why we take them for granted and we accept them as is would be that um, some people don't have the time to check and double check. And also, the idea of challenging them can also cause issues and problems for the questioners and the challengers. Can sometimes be very dangerous to challenge a moral belief. Mute your mic unless you have a question. Okay. So when we talk about traditions and we talk about beliefs, I know obviously beliefs and traditions are one and the same. We will have two voices. We will have two schools of thought, as a matter of fact. We will have people who believe that moral beliefs should be uh, obeyed and should be stuck to no matter what. And those people are called moral traditionalists. And they belong to a school of thought that is called moral traditionalism. Again, they want us to keep following the tradition no matter what. And against them, we would have a school of moral rationalists, those who believe that we should always use our minds and our powers of reason. Again, they are called moral rationalists. So you have two schools when it comes to moral beliefs. You have the moral traditionalism school, where we have people who believe very strongly about tradition, and they believe that tradition and moral beliefs shouldn't change no matter what. They shouldn't be questioned or challenged. Moral rationalists, on the other hand, believe that everything should stand or should be subjected to the mind. In other words, you have to question everything. You need to check whether some of those moral beliefs make sense or not. And how can you know whether they make sense or not? You subject them to the mind. You think about them using your mental powers, your rational powers. If they agree with your rational powers, fine, you accept them. If they don't agree, you discard and dismiss them. Again, philosophers will be the moral rationalists, whether we're talking about Plato, Socrates, or any other philosopher, because they use their mind. They don't accept anything unless it goes through the mind. Moral traditionalists are, people that you find in society, conservatives, people who believe more in things, in accepting things as is without using the mind. Again, like I said, Plato happens to be a moral rationalist. Again, you can you can automatically understand that if we talk about moral beliefs and traditional moral beliefs, so Plato will stop and say, listen, we need to think about them. We used to challenge them and see whether they make sense or not. So why? Why does Plato reject tradition? Again, you can, without going further, you can almost tell. Plato is a philosopher, which means that he is a rationalist. He uses his mind, and tradition is something that people want you to accept as is without asking. Okay, so he has issues with that. Again, the idea of holding tradition in such a great esteem, the idea of looking up to tradition without asking any questions is something that Plato wouldn't agree with, because he is a rationalist, and he is a rationalist philosopher who believes that everything should go through the mind. So why does Plato think that our moral beliefs should be grounded on reason rather than tradition? And why does he reject moral traditionalism in favor of moral rationalism? Again, like I told you, you don't need to read a lot about that. If you know that Plato is a rationalist who believes in the power and the powers of reason and the mind, and if you know that tradition is about believing things as is without asking any questions, you automatically conclude that he is against tradition, and sometimes he even rejects it wholesale. Okay, so you have those two opposing strands. You, on the one hand, you have this idea that knowledge involves understanding something for yourself, uh, um, using, of course, reason. And of course, when you talk about tradition, you have this strand that says that the proper source of moral beliefs will be tradition. So again, they are at loggerheads and they are opposing each other. So traditional beliefs are beliefs that we take on trust. Take on trust means that we trust them very blindly without asking any question, without challenging, without reflecting on them. We don't reflect on them. Reflecting on them means that you stop and say, why? Why do I do that? Why do I have um, if I have to go to school, I have to wear a uniform. When we were in our secondary school and primary and intermediate school, schools insisted that you wear a uniform, and then this is tradition. When you ask mom, why do I have to wear this kind of clothes and not my own clothes, the clothes that I like, mom would tell you, this is how things go, which means she's trying to tell you that this is tradition. Okay, so it's this idea of reflecting, and this idea that you stop and say, why? Why do I have to wear a uniform every day? So this is questioning a traditional practice that has been there for years and years. So for Plato, beliefs of this kind are merely opinions. Okay, so what your people are giving us are mere opinions, and we need to reflect on them using our power of reasons. Again, we need to turn them into knowledge, and they cannot be knowledge unless, of course, they come through the mind, and for the most part, the mind would find it not a very interesting idea that people have to wear uniform every day unless you convince the mind. So again, we're talking about tradition in this sense as a set of beliefs that are passed down from one generation to another by the followers of a particular philosophy. Again, if you keep repeating those traditions, if you keep embracing them, you are more or less like a parrot. You know what a parrot is? Barbarian. Parrots echo and repeat things without using their minds. So you're more or less like a parrot. We'll talk about that. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, and then we move to the extracts themselves and see who is there in them. We will have Plato, of course, as the writer of the dialogues, whether we're talking about Laches or Nicias. I'm talking about the pieces of work. So Plato is the original writer, and Socrates is the carrier of his ideas. And he's going to carry those ideas by being a character involved in the conversations and the dialogues. Um, so is this Socrates, the Socrates that we know about from history, is this the historical Socrates? No. This is an invented or made up Socrates that Plato created in order to express and communicate his ideas. So why does Plato talk straight? Why doesn't he directly talk to people? Again, his style is different. His style is dialogic. Dialogic means that he doesn't gives us things in a kind of first or third person type of way. He uses the second person where you normally have people interacting with each other. And then out of those encounters and interactions, ideas come out. Again, he's not involved himself. He is not one of the characters, but Socrates is one of the characters. And he is doing that perhaps out of gratitude to Socrates. Remember, we said that Socrates didn't leave a single piece of paper of what he has been or had been talking about. So perhaps Plato wanted to immortalize and give immortality to Socrates by having them as one of the main characters, if not the main character. And he is normally known to carry the ideas of Plato himself. Okay, so it is important to distinguish between the real historical Socrates and the character that appears in Plato's dialogues. So while the historical Socrates was clearly an important influence on Plato, there is no reason to assume that Plato wrote his dialogues simply as a showcase for Socratic philosophy. So the ideas that Socrates expresses in Plato's work are Plato's ideas rather than Socratic ideas. Again, most of the work that Socrates or the invented Socrates involved in has to do with the qualities of virtues that people need in order to live a good life. So you will have dialogues where Socrates introduces ideas like piety, friendship, temperance, and justice, and they all have moral underpinnings to them. In Lachos, and then the part that we're doing, uh, um, it's about courage. And in Lachos, you will find that the question is addressed to two military generals. And then over time, we'll get to know why he chose military generals. And then ideas would evolve and develop from there. Again, we need to also, kind of mention the fact that Plato's dialogues are male. I mean, the characters in Plato's dialogues are all male. Again, why is that? Because women at the time were thought very little of. Again, the dialogues that we're having are all about courage, and courage at one point will be defined from the standpoint of the military and military leaders. And of course, you know that at the time women were not engaged in any military endeavors. And at the time, they would define courage based on military feats. So if women are not part of the military, so they are not defined as courageous, and they are not even, kind of consulted for opinion on courage and the other matters. So am I making sense? You guys have any questions so far? How many are we? Guys, you have any questions, Emma?
Yes, doctor. No, thanks.
Okay. So are you enjoying it? Do you find it interesting? Philosophy, Plato? Hmm.
Yes, I think
Hmm.
it's interesting.
Okay, good. Right. Again, what is also interesting about the dialogues that we'll have is the idea that none of the characters presented will manage to give an answer that passes Socrates' test. So it is as if Socrates is giving them a test, and of course, test and testing is about asking questions. So he would ask a question and then he gets an answer, and then yeah, asks another question and then he gets an answer, and then he moves on and on and on. So if I ask you a question and you give me an answer, and then I ask you a question, a further question, and then you give me an answer and I ask you a further question, does it mean that I'm happy with your answer? If I keep asking you questions on the same thing or about the same thing, I ask you a question and then you give me an answer. Then I ask you a further question and then you give me another answer, and then I ask you a further question. Does it mean that your answers are correct for me or to me? No, I'm asking you.
because he wants things about the answer and question, right?
No, wrong. I'm asking a simple question. If I ask you a question now and then you give me an answer, but I give you another question about this about the same idea, does it mean that I am happy with your answer if I ask you more
No,
questions? No.
no.
So this is what Socrates, this is the Socratic method. Okay, he asks you a question and then you give him an answer, and then he asks you a further question and you give him an answer, and then so what would be your reaction? What do you think about that? If I ask you a question and then you give me an answer, and then I ask you the question in a different way, and then you give me an answer, and then the same question in a different way, how would you feel?
I
I
was
think I would
thinking,
feel
Mm.
annoyed.
Yeah, you will feel annoyed. Absolutely, you will feel confused. Why is he asking me so many questions? I answered him already. You feel frustrated, annoyed, baffled. You don't know why he is doing that. And actually, this is what Socrates' friends felt when he asks them a question and then they answer, and then he asks another and a third. This is called the Socratic method, and sometimes it got on the nerves of people. It baffled and frustrated them. And they started to even think bad about Socrates. They would say, why is he doing that? I think he's deceiving us. If he asks us questions and then asks us further questions, it means that he knows the answer, but he is hiding it from us. And if he is doing that, it means that he is deceitful, that he is kind of cheating us. He's not being honest. Okay, so this is the Socratic method. The Socratic method is about asking so many questions about the self same thing. So again, Socrates in this way is very intriguing and also very annoying. And there is always this frequent complaint about Socrates that is worth a closer look. So some of Plato's characters are irritated by Socrates' refusal to put forward views of his own, while being quite ready to criticize the views of others. Socrates responds by saying that he genuinely does not know the answers to the questions that he is investigating. People wouldn't buy that. They said, yeah, okay, we ran out of answers. Oh, you answer us. Start answering us. He would say, no, I genuinely don't know the answers to the questions that I am investigating. He says that what I have is more or less philosophical assumptions, but not real answers. So again, you can almost there is a pattern to Socratic arguments where you normally have this idea of returning to the same points again and again. which would give people the impression that he is being deceitful, especially when he says that he doesn't know the answer or the answers to his own questions. So again, he is more or less very puzzling. And obviously, Plato does not introduce Socrates and his method in order to portray him as guilty of deliberate deceit. Of course not, because he likes him and he respects him a great deal. So why does Plato present him? Him is, of course, a reference to Socrates as denying that he knows the answers to his questions, whilst at the same time favoring some answers over others. So why Socrates does not know the answers and why Plato will not tell us what they are? Why? Why do we think he doesn't give us the answers straight?
Maybe he want for student thinking, and this
Yeah,
is way
that's
for teaching.
yeah. It's interesting. The idea of not giving you ready-made answers for things. He wants you to do research, to think, to use your mind, right?
Yes, doctor.
So it looks as if Plato is portraying Socrates as behaving in a deceitful way, which we said, yeah, it may look this way, but this is not what uh, yeah, Plato intended. Actually, Plato is trying to make this distinction between true opinion and knowledge. Um, and he wants to tell us that unless you have real experience, you shouldn't be venturing into definitions and answers. You need to, kind of think about what you are saying, and you only answer if you have the practical experience that would back up your claims and what you're saying. So Socrates, in this case, does have some opinions about the questions that he poses. He may even be fairly confident that these opinions are true. ولكن, nevertheless, he may be aware that he cannot explain why they are true. Okay, I know, for example, that this is the right answer, but because I don't have enough experience, I cannot. If you follow your question, if I ask you a question and then you answer and I tell you why, so you have to come up with reasons. So unless those reasons are backed up with experience, they just don't make sense. So as you can see, Socrates' aim is not to deceive people, but rather to entice them. Entice means to tempt them or to convince them to puzzle out what he means, to try to understand what he means. So again, this is all Plato's way of, creating those dialogues, and obviously Socrates is only his invention. So whenever we have a problem, we shouldn't direct the problem to Socrates. It is Plato who is behind everything. So Plato's views on knowledge may also explain why he gives such a prominent role to Socrates' method of question and answer. So obviously Plato is so convinced with this method of questioning and answer, and obviously it has been known that Socrates was using it. So as you can see, Socrates does not try to impart his opinion, to give his opinions to the other characters by delivering a lecture. He doesn't want to give a lecture and say, yeah, this is the answer, this is how it should go. Yeah, he does not believe in lecturing. Instead, his questions encourage them to think about the issues for themselves. Like, what's her name? Like Bushra said, he wants us to think for ourselves. He wants thinking to be a habit of the mind for all of us. So his questions encourage them to think about the issues for themselves. Um, so the discussions, even if we have conclusions and answers, the discussion cannot proceed unless they have understood and agreed to each step in the argument. So it's not about giving an answer and you just go away. No, you need to even explain why you think the way you think, and then the group would agree on the answer for them to move to the next level. So Socrates' method can be used to help people achieve the kind of understanding that Plato believed was required for philosophical knowledge. Um, Again, it's more or less like a way of thinking that Plato is trying to entrench in everybody's mind. It's the idea of people discussing things and agreeing and disagreeing. He doesn't like this idea that you have perhaps what we now call teacher-fronted classes. And what I'm doing is a teacher-fronted classes where, of course, you're not helping me. Otherwise, we could have changed the setting and the way we're doing things. So obviously, we're not doing it the Socratic and the Platonic way, right? Am I doing it the Platonic way where I ask you questions and then you answer and then I ask you further questions?
No, no.
You're not giving me the chance to do that, right? What I'm doing is the traditional way where I'm in front of the class and I say everything. Okay, this is obviously not the Socratic method, right? The Socratic method is,
Every teacher has a way for
yes,
teaching.
yes. I think I have, yeah, look at this, Sigma. Um, which of them is my way? Which way
Maybe
I
one, maybe Victor number one.
yeah, the one on the left, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay, where the teacher is giving everything, right?
yes,
And the students are only listening. So it's a one-way street, right?
yes, all right.
Okay, let's look at the second picture. Where is the teacher? Can you identify the teacher?
No,
No, right? So why?
maybe they discuss.
Yeah, they are discussing things, right? And obviously, you have this leveling process where everybody's coming with an idea, and they don't have preferences. You don't have this idea that the teacher's idea is better than the ideas of the others, right? So the second one, the second picture is the picture of the Socratic method, right? Again, if you move further down at the bottom, it's the same thing, right? Where people are moving sometimes and then sitting and then, okay.
Picture number three.
Yeah, yes. Okay. Okay, so Plato's views on knowledge might explain why he chose to write dialogues rather than essays. And that this is also another question. Why didn't he write essays instead of having dialogues where people, fight over ideas and they agree and disagree? Why doesn't he give us his ideas straight away. So by writing a dialogue, Plato, no less than Socrates, avoids simply presenting us with his opinion. He doesn't want to give us his opinions, but instead he encourages us to reflect on the questions raised by his characters. He wants us to think. Again, it's about the action and the reaction and what is happening. So most of Plato's early dialogues end without a clear answer, inviting us to continue the investigation for ourselves. You don't have definitive answers, and this is perhaps uh, is the beauty of it. Again, the Socratic method, teaching and learning, and I have given you the two examples: the teacher-fronted classes and the Socratic method classes, where the teacher is a man among men, man or a woman for that matter. You cannot really know whether, I mean, the teacher obviously doesn't have a fixed place in the class. He asks and questions, and then he gets asked questions, and it's all about this atmosphere of knowledge sharing and investigating that we have. So the historical Socrates does not seem to have presented himself as a teacher. He never said that I am a teacher. And in his dialogues, Plato contrasts Socrates with other intellectuals who did present themselves as teachers and try to pass on their wisdom through lectures. So obviously, they don't believe in lectures and in books. Um, Again, so obviously, they believe that there is more to teaching than just imparting or giving information. According to Socrates and Plato, uh, um, that would require active inquiry. You do research, you investigate, you come up with your own ideas. Again, this way has been adopted, this method, I mean, the Socratic method, has been adopted by schools and universities all over the world. As we speak, there are lots of learning centers that are using the Socratic method. Uh, so, do you have any questions so far? Would you like us to stop on this note and perhaps pick things up next time because it's a little heavy-handed or something? What do you think? Should we stop?
The doctor.
What do you think? Right. Let's stop on this note and with this item. And when we meet again on Sunday, inshallah, we can finish Plato and move on to another chapter, inshallah. Do you have any questions, everyone?
No, doctor, thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I'll see you on Sunday, inshallah. Well, have a nice weekend. Salam alaikum.
So